It's all blurry. There we go. Oops, that's why. Okay. I have to put my stethoscope on. Fun fact, kind of fun, not that fun. More people watch videos when you wear a stethoscope. So even if you're not a doctor and you want more people to watch videos, just wear a stethoscope. Another fun, not really fun fact is I have 3 stethoscopes because I don't usually wear them around my neck. And so I have one in each room because otherwise I leave it and I spend half the visit going from room to room trying to find my stethoscope. And they all have a different Sesame Street character or Disney character or something like that on them. Okay, I have 15 minutes before I have to make a phone call. And so I'm setting my alarm so I don't forget, and I'm going to answer some questions for 15 minutes. And if you have a question, click the button and just comment and drop the question. Otherwise, I have a couple to go through for our Parenting Daily Dose live today. There's also a button at the bottom that's pbmd.co/question, and that will, you can just go drop a question there if you have one too. It's either question or questions. Now I'm questioning if it's question or questions. That's the other side, question. It's question. Yep. That's where you'll find it. Okay, so the questions. Hello. Wondering about iron deficiency. If that is linked to behavioral and sleep issues, I have a picky eater and wondering if I need to supplement her iron intake. So, great question. And first and foremost, iron deficiency in the industrialized first world is not often a big problem if we don't drink too much milk. The number one cause of iron deficiency is in the United States is too much dairy consumption. And the reason for that is because they fill up on dairy and then their tummies are full and parents think they're great eaters because they drink lots of milk. And pediatricians often try and say, well, how many ounces of milk are they drinking? It's so important that they drink tons and tons of milk, when in reality, it's not that important. It's super blurry. And so when it comes to milk, I try and encourage parents not to have their kids drink that much milk. They can do milk at meal times, and if they do milk at meal times, then that's enough milk. You don't have to worry about it. I'm never going to ask you at a checkup, how many ounces of milk are they drinking? Well, they should be drinking this many ounces of milk, or they should be drinking this many ounces of milk, because throughout human history, your ancestors did not drink that much milk. This is a new got milk thing. 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, people were not drinking cow's milk. And so we've grown up throughout human history without a lot of cow's milk. And so the number one cause, like I said, of iron deficiency in the United States is certainly too much cow's milk intake and not enough other foods. Does iron deficiency cause behavioral and sleep issues? Interestingly, it can. And this is not like the way you might think it happens, but one of the things that can go along with iron deficiency is restless leg syndrome. And so this can happen in children. They often don't characterize it well enough that people put 2 and 2 together. But kids that have sleeping problems can have restless leg syndrome, and that can be caused by iron deficiency. So it's usually not the case if they're eating a well-balanced diet and they are having sleep issues. It's not even in the first line things that I would do for them. But if they're doing everything else, but they drink a ton of milk and you're worried that they're anemic or they're iron deficient, then it might be helpful to check ferritin, because that gives you an indication of their iron stores, and those things can contribute to sleep issues, which then poor sleep can contribute to behavior issues. So it's not that they're entirely unlinked, but it's not the most typical thing that I hear or think of when we're just talking about regular old behavior or sleep issues. The test for it is easy. It's like a drop of blood. It's a few drops of blood. We're watching the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos show right now, and we read the Bad Blood book together, and have been super consumers of all of the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos stuff because it's so interesting. So I shouldn't say it's a drop of blood. It's a little bit of blood. It's not that much blood, but it is a little bit of blood to check for that. But there is some link. So bottom line, when it comes to iron deficiency, in the United States, the number one cause of iron deficiency in toddlers and school-age children is overconsumption of dairy and drinking so much dairy that you don't eat other foods. Your belly gets full, you get anemic. I've seen kids, like a normal hemoglobin is around 11 to 13 in the toddler age group, and I have seen kids with hemoglobins of 4 or less because they've drank so much milk, and they drink cow's milk, and they drink a gallon a day, not a gallon a day, but a good half gallon to a gallon per day, and they're happy and chubby, but their hemoglobin is terrible, and it has effects on brain development and brain maturation too. I don't think that's the case if we're just talking about some behavioral and sleep issues. It's typically unrelated, or perhaps through restless leg syndrome as kind of the conduit to that. So hopefully that helps and makes sense. Okay. Hi, Dr. B. Do you work with families unsure about vaccines? Absolutely. I mean, am I unsure about vaccines? I mean, sometimes it's something that I learn about and continue to make sure that I feel confident in. Vaccine hesitancy is normal. Vaccine hesitancy is, hey, I have this healthy baby here. Why are you going to do something to them? Well, because when we look at the risks and benefits, we know that vaccine preventable diseases can be serious, and so that's a risk. And there's also the risk of giving them something that is a foreign substance that has chemicals. I mean, everything has chemicals in it, but is that a risk? Which is the greater risk? What is the greater benefit? We work through that all the time. And I talk with parents about that all the time. And I try and make it very clear that I'm going to make sure that you feel heard, acknowledged, and understood before I tell you what I think you should do, which won't come as a surprise to you. But I'm going to work and walk through that with you. I really struggle with pediatricians that say we don't see anybody that's hesitant about vaccines. Because as pediatricians, one of our most important tasks that we are well equipped for is talking about vaccines and making people feel comfortable and confident in their decision. And if we shut our doors, turn off our phones, don't accept patients that are unsure about vaccines, then they're going to go somewhere where they feel heard and understood with that information, misinformation, disinformation that they may be sitting with, because their questions are unanswered and somebody will listen to them. And we have physicians in our town that promote misinformation about vaccines, and if we aren't willing to even entertain the discussion, if we just close our practices and say no, we don't take anybody like you, then we're going to turn those people straight over to them. And most people are vaccine hesitant, not vaccine refusers. And so if we can talk with them, if we can make them feel heard and understood, then it's much more likely that they're actually going to decide, okay, I want to do what's best for my child. And this is what, based on my discussions, based on the information that I have, based on my discussion with my pediatrician, I feel is best for my child. And so that's a really important conversation, and one that should definitely be done. So yes, really long answer. Do you work with families unsure about vaccines? Absolutely, every day. And we talk through those things and take the time to feel heard and understood, and do it in a dignified way. Oops, that's the same question that I just asked. Oops, I put the same question up thrice. Let's see. Whoa, that's also not the right question, and now it's just huge. Oh, okay. This was the third question that I was trying to find. Okay, usually I'm a little more prepared. Hi, Dr. B. How do you deal with a family who is your main daycare and have different beliefs regarding parenting than you? For instance, timeouts, swatting hands when doing wrong, spanking, etc. This is tough. It's tough when family members are not on board, whether it be relatives, whether it be your partner, your spouse, whether it be your main source of daycare that is not on board with what you've decided you want to do in terms of parenting and raising and rearing your child. And it can be a real challenge, and it can cause us stress and anxiety and frustration and hurt feelings. And I will say, I've had patients and parents that have struggled with this so much that they've changed daycare. They don't speak or, communicate with family members. Like, this is a big deal, and it's something that we need to make sure that we get right. I think the best thing to do when you're confronted with this and with this question of, hey, we actually don't do that in our family in terms of discipline, whether it be timeouts, swatting hands, spanking, those different things. The best approach, I feel, is first and foremost talking about it when it's not in the heat of the moment. Hearing that you're going to pick up your child and they got spanked by their daycare provider, which obviously would not be in a commercial regulated daycare setting, but a family member or friend or something like that. You don't want to present it at that moment because tension will be high, but you do want to follow up and say, hey, your parenting style and my parenting style are a little bit different. Obviously, everything is, everyone has their own individualized styles. And I wanted to have a conversation about what you feel comfortable with, what we feel comfortable with, so that we can be on the same page when it comes to taking care of our child. And then you put those boundaries in place. You say, in our family, we don't hit, which is a super reasonable boundary. And I would say a very appropriate boundary is to not hit your child. And so you say, that's not what we do. Here's what we do when those things come up where it sounds like you have resorted to swatting or spanking. You don't want to make them feel like a bad person for it, because then they will close down and not be open to what you have to say. But you can say, here's what we do in those circumstances, and here's what works for us, and here's what hasn't worked for us, and here's what we've learned from, and sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes we have to do this. If you talk through with that and form a collegial sort of relationship of, here's what we do and this doesn't work, here's what we do and this one doesn't work, and then ask them, how does that sound to you? Then that opens the door for them to share their feedback. Well, in my day, everyone was spanked and blah, 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 blah. And then you can say, well, I understand where you're coming from. It sounds like back in your day, everybody was spanked and blah, 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 blah. But that's something that we've decided we're not going to do for our family, and we need to figure out a way to work together to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore. Boundaries. Setting boundaries, but communicating them in a loving and empathetic way is the best way to have these difficult discussions. What you don't want to do is just keep allowing it to happen, because it makes you feel bad as a parent, and it's not what you want for your child, and you have a say and you have the authority and control over that. But you also don't want to destroy the relationship. You don't want to harm the relationship when there's probably an issue with communication rather than an issue with them just wanting to do this thing. They've probably swatted, hands spanked, because that's what they were swatted and had their hands swatted and were spanked in the past, and that's what they're used to, and that's what they did for their kids. So if we're going to do something different, it's just a conversation that we need to have. So it's a tricky conversation. It's not easy, but I think it's worthwhile, and I hope that helps. Okay, if you have questions, my timer is going off, but I would love to continue answering questions. So please feel free to ask questions. pbmd.co/question is the place to drop a question, and I'll answer it on an upcoming Parenting Daily Dose Live.